Hello, welcome. If you enjoy my stories, do me a big favor. Review my page and drop a comment below to help encourage the algorithm to show this episode to more people like you. It could be where you're listening from, the time there, your favorite story in history, anything. I read every note. There is a name you once learned in school, perhaps a long time ago. A name about a triangle. You copied it into a notebook, you were tested on it, and then you set it down and probably never thought of it again. But the man behind that name, he was not thinking about triangles. He believed the numbers were alive, that 4 was a thing within your soul, that the stars overhead were singing a chorus too ancient and too constant for any human ear to catch. He built a whole world on that belief, a secret world, walled and veiled and sworn to silence. And that world was burned to the ground. We kept one small, clean fact that fit on a chalkboard, and we let everything else he taught get buried and nearly lost. Tonight, we don't just visit the mathematician Pythagoras. We slip instead through a gate that took most men years to walk through, if they were able to make it through at all. Behind it lived a brotherhood that guarded its secrets so completely that when the fire came, the secrets very nearly burned with them. Almost everything they believed, the world simply forgot. I want to remember a little of it with you, the thing worth surrendering a whole life to learn. By the end, you'll be armed with forgotten knowledge that will change the course of your very life. Welcome, Nightlings. This is Huxley. If you like listening or falling asleep to real stories that will reveal life's deeper truths, then this is the place for you. Consider subscribing and let the next story find you when you need it most. We are close towards a milestone for this little channel, 5,000 followers. It is not much, I know, but it is progress, and I cannot get there without your help. So if you have thoroughly enjoyed one of my episodes, share it with a friend who needs it. Follow if you have not. It matters more than it should. Thank you for being here. Now, let me put out the lights, find a comfortable seat, and let's begin where every telling of this story must begin. Not at the beginning, but at the end, in a raging fire, Croton. A city on the instep of southern Italy, in the years when its brotherhood still held the town in its quiet grip. It is night, and something is wrong with the light. There is a house here that everyone in the city knows. The house of Milo, the wrestler, the great champion whose name had been shouted at the Olympic Games until the hills gave it back as echo. A strong man's house, broad-beamed, thick-walled, safe. And inside it tonight are gathered the quiet ones, the men and women who have governed this city not with armies but with numbers and silence, who rise before dawn and eat plain bread and speak when they speak at all in riddles. They are not expecting what is coming up the street. Torches, but not the torches of a festival. You can tell the difference, even from far off, in the way they move. Festival light drifts and sways. This light comes on straight and fast and low, carried by hands that mean it. It gathers at the doors, and then, from outside, the doors are barred. Understand what that means. Not to keep something out, to keep something in. The first smoke is almost gentle. It threads up under the eaves like a grey ribbon, curling, patient. Then the patience ends. Then the house of the strongest man in Croton is a single standing flame against the black, and the sound that comes from it, I won't describe to you. Some things a story should walk up to, and then step back from. Only two get out, two of the youngest, pulled through a gap in the burning by hands that reach back into the fire once, and then are not seen again. The two boys stumble into the dark street, coughing alive, carrying between them the only thing that survives this night. Not a scroll, not a treasure. A memory. A way of seeing the world that will now have to be smuggled out of this city like contraband and kept alive by whisper for 2,000 years. And here is what I cannot stop turning over. Nightling. This was a brotherhood that taught, that staked everything on, the belief that the soul can never truly die, that nothing loved is ever lost, only changed. So how? How does a circle of people who believed that the deepest truth of the universe is that nothing ends, end here, as ash blowing sideways across an empty street? To answer that, we have to go back. Let us give him a name. The old stories kept none for him. He is not in any book, this young man, and I want to be honest with you about that from the very first breath. He is my invention, a candle I'm lighting so we have something to follow through the dark. But everything he sees, every strange rule and stranger wonder, is real. Either sober history or a genuine, ancient legend that people truly told. He is imagined. What he witnesses is not. So, let us call him Theron. Theron came to Croton the way most people came to anywhere in those days, by sea and unwillingly. He had not meant to travel this far, but there are griefs that make a house unbearable, that turn every familiar doorway into a small accusation. And he was carrying one of those. A death, perhaps, or the quieter kind of death. A life that had simply stopped meaning anything. All at once, the way a lamp goes out and leaves you sitting in a room you no longer recognize. He never quite named it, even to himself. He only knew he had to be somewhere else, and that a boat was leaving, and that he was on it. Croton, when he arrived, did not look like a place that held any secrets. It looked, honestly, like abundance. This was one of the richest cities in the Greek world. A colony on the far western frontier, where Greeks had come generations before to build a second Greece under a bigger sky. White temples with red and blue trim stood along streets that smelled of the harbour and of drying fish and of wood smoke. Athletes trained in the open. Croton produced champions the way other cities produced pottery. There was a doctor here whose name travelled as far as Persia. It was a loud, sunlit, muscular kind of place, proud of its bodies and its victories. And somewhere inside all that noise, Theron had heard there was a man who taught. That was all he wanted. A teacher, a school, somewhere to put his restless, aching mind while the rest of him slowly healed or slowly didn't. He pictured a courtyard, some benches, an old man answering questions. He had money enough for fees. He was ready to be a student. So he asked, and he was pointed up a road, and he walked until he came to the gate. And the first thing they did was tell him no, not cruelly. That was the strange part. There was no scorn in it. A man met him there, calm and unhurried, and listened to Theron explain what he wanted, and then gently began taking it apart. "You have come," the man seemed to say, "to learn some things, but that is not what happens here. Here, we do not add knowledge to the life you already have. Here, the life itself is the lesson. What you eat, that will change. When you wake, that will change. Whether you may speak at all and to whom and when, that, most of all, will change." Theron did not understand. He had come for answers, and this man was talking about his breakfast, you must understand. And I think this is the thing to hold on to tonight, that what waited behind that gate was not a school in any sense Theron had a word for. Modern people who have studied it their whole lives still reach past the word school and land on words like order, or brotherhood, or quietly, monastery. What Pythagoras built at Croton, around 530 years before our era, was not a place you went to learn a subject. It was a bios, a Greek word that means simply a life, a whole way of living, reordered from the ground up around one man's teaching. Your meals, your sleep, your friendships, your marriage, your death, all of it reshaped. To learn here, Theron was being told he would have to be remade. And here is why he did not turn around and walk back down to the harbor, though every practical bone in his body told him to. It was the grief because a man who has lost the meaning of his life is secretly the one man on earth for whom you must become someone new, does not sound like a threat. It sounds like a door. So he stayed. He was told to wait, and he was told this part he noticed, and it made the hair on his arms stand up a little, that from this moment on he would be watched, not guarded, watched, studied. They wanted, it seemed, to know exactly what kind of man had walked up their road before they would let him hear a single word worth keeping. They did not admit you to that place because you knocked. The old stories say the Brotherhood studied a candidate the way a jeweler studies a rough stone, turning it, holding it to the light, looking for the flaw before spending any labor on it. They watched how a man walked. They listened to how he laughed, because a laugh is a hard thing to fake and tells you more than a speech. They noted whether he could be still, whether he was gentle with the people beneath him, and honest with the people above him, and patient with the people who wasted his time. Some traditions say this watching went on for years, a long probation before you were anything at all, and that some candidates, having waited and hoped and rearranged their whole lives, were simply, quietly turned away. Theron did not know how long his own watching would last. That was part of it, I think. You cannot perform patience if you know the test ends Thursday. And when at last he was permitted his first real encounter with the Master, the man he had crossed the sea to find, the mind behind everything here, he did not see a face. he saw a curtain, a hanging veil, heavy in the still air, and behind it a shape, and from the shape a voice. The novices were allowed to hear the master. They were not yet allowed to see him. And that word, hear, was not casual. It was the whole of their name. The newcomers, the ones in Theron's position, were called the acousmatikoi, the listeners, the ones who receive the teaching as sound through a veil on faith, before they have earned the right to look at its source. Sit with how strange that is. He had given up his home, his freedom, his voice, for a curtain and a voice behind it. And of course, the question that rose in him is the question rising in you right now. Who is this man? The whispers Theron gathered in his silent months did not make the answer smaller. They made it enormous. He was from Samos, they said, a green island far to the east, off the coast of Asia, where he'd been born the son of a gem cutter. Picture that. A father bent over a lamp, incising tiny gods into stones the size of a fingernail. A whole trade built on precision and patience and the miniature. A fitting cradle, maybe, for a mind that would go looking for the exact hidden order of things. But the boy had not stayed a gem cutter's son. The stories sent him east, to Egypt, to sit with the priests of Memphis and learn their secrets and their silences and their linen robes, and on in the wildest tellings to Babylon, carried off as a captive when a Persian king swept through. And there among the Chaldean stargazers, he is said to have learned the deep arithmetic of the heavens. How much of that is true? Less than the tale wants, and more than a skeptic would like. Egypt, at least, the earliest and soberest voices allow him. The rest is embroidery, but ancient embroidery, stitched close to his own lifetime. And then the whispers stopped being about geography at all. They said, when he crossed a certain river, the water itself spoke his name aloud. And that many people heard it. They said he had been seen in 2 cities on the same day, at the same hour, which no man can be. They said that under his robe, on his thigh, was a birthmark of pure gold, and that he had once bared it at the Olympic Games as quiet proof that he was not entirely a man. The people of Croton had a name for him that they used without quite laughing. They called him the Hyperborean Apollo. Apollo, come down from the mythic north to walk among them. Now, I want to be careful here, and I want you to notice how I'm being careful, because it matters. I am not going to tell you a river talked. What I'll tell you is this. People who actually met this man could not afterward write about him plainly. They reached past the ordinary words. They gave him a golden thigh, and 2 bodies, and a river that knew his name. And that is the real evidence, not of magic, but of magnetism. When the people who stood in a man's actual presence can only describe him by making him a god, you have learned something true about the size of him, even if you've learned nothing you could prove. So, Theron sat before the curtain and listened to the voice and wondered, as you are wondering, whether he had come to study under a philosopher or something stranger. He would not get to see the face, not for a long time. First, there was one rule he would have to keep, longer and harder than any of the others. The rule that would swallow the next 5 years of his life. The rule was silence. Not an afternoon of it. Not a retreat, a week, a season, 5 years. The novice entered the brotherhood, and the old stories say, closed his mouth for half a decade. Permitted to listen, forbidden to speak. They had a word for it, this long shutting, ecomythia, the holding of one's tongue. Now, when you first hear that, it sounds like punishment. It sounds like something done to a person. But that isn't how they understood it at all. And I don't think it's how Theron came to understand it either. It was not a cage, it was a training. Here is the idea underneath it, and it's one of those ideas that seems small until you actually try to live it. You cannot truly hear another person while you are waiting to reply. You cannot receive anything while your whole attention is coiled around the thing you're about to say. Most of us, most of the time, are not listening. We're reloading. And so they reasoned, this strange brotherhood. Before we teach you anything, we will take away the one thing that keeps you from learning. We will take away your voice. And in the silence that's left, maybe, for the first time, you will actually hear. Let me set you down inside it for a moment. You sit. You are told nothing. You listen. That's the whole of it, for longer than you think you can bear. No one explains. No one reassures you that you're progressing, because being told you're progressing is a reward, and rewards are for people who still need them. You simply sit, day after day, and take the world in without pushing anything back out. And a curious thing happens. Somewhere in the second year, the third, the noise inside you, the constant defending and rehearsing and answering, starts to quiet. Not because you've won an argument with it, because it got tired of shouting into a room that never shouted back. Theron's days took on a shape, and the shape held him. He rose before the sun. The first act of the morning, every morning, was a walk taken entirely alone, out to some quiet grove or the edge of a temple, where he could be no one and speak to no one, so that the soul, they believed, could settle itself and grow calm before it had to meet another human face. You did not carry yesterday's turbulence into the company of others. You walked it still first, then, and only then, the simplest breakfast, bread, a little honey, water rather than wine. Then the long day of study he could witness but not yet enter, and gymnastics and the ordinary business of a shared life. In the afternoon, another walk, but this one in 2s and 3s, companionship allowed now, after the solitude of dawn. And music, always music, threaded through all of it. Not for entertainment, never that. They used the lyre the way a physician uses medicine. They believed that harmony in the strings could restore harmony in a troubled soul, that the right melody could untie a knot of anger or grief that no argument could reach. But it was the last practice of the day that changed Theron most. Each night, before he was permitted to let sleep take him, he was to lie in the dark and walk back through the entire day, in order from waking to this very moment. Every word he had heard, every word he had, in gesture or in writing, given back, every act, every choice, every small failure, and of each one he was to ask, quietly, without cruelty, where did I fall short? What did I do? And gentlest and heaviest of all, what did I leave undone? One old version of the teaching puts it something like this: do not let sleep close your eyes until you have gone back 3 times over across all the deeds of your day. Only then were you allowed to rest. I want you to notice what that is. It is not punishment either. It is not lying in the dark counting your sins so you can hate yourself to sleep. That's a modern habit and a poor one. It is an accounting done in a level voice. Not what am I, but what did I do, and what did I still owe? And then, this is the part we forget. You set it down. You've looked at it honestly. Now you may sleep. Somewhere in all those silent years, the strangest thing of all happened to Theron. Having nothing to say, he began at last to hear. And the very first thing he truly heard, after so long, after so much quiet, was not a lecture and not a secret doctrine. It was a single, ordinary sound, and it undid him. Of everything this brotherhood believed, and they believed some strange things, as we'll see, there was one teaching that every ancient voice agrees the master truly held. Not the theorem, not the triangle. This, that the soul does not die, that when the body fails, the thing that lived inside it is not snuffed out, not sent down to some grey and gibbering underworld to moan forever among shadows. Instead, it moves, it passes on into another life, another body, and not always a human one. It might wake next in a child yet unborn. It might wake in a beast of the field, or a bird, or the dog asleep in the doorway. Life after life, house after house, the same deathless traveller, changing its clothes but never its nature. They had a long word for it. We can just call it the wandering of the soul. Now, Theron had heard this taught from behind the veil as doctrine. Words. He had not yet felt it. And then one day, he saw the thing that made it real. Or rather, he heard the story that the oldest sources tell of the master himself, and it lodged in him like a splinter of light. The story goes that the master was walking one day and came upon a man beating a puppy in the street. And he stopped. He put himself between the man and the small crying animal, and, as one ancient version has him say it, "Stop, don't strike him again. I heard the voice of a friend in that cry. I knew it. That is the soul of a man I loved. He heard a dead friend in the yelp of a dog. I have to be honest with you about where that story comes from, because the honesty is half its beauty. It comes to us from a man who was mocking him. One of the master's own contemporaries wrote it down, not in wonder, but in ridicule, holding it up to laugh at. Look at this fool who thinks he can hear his lost friends in the whining of animals. And that is precisely why we still have it. The doubters, the scoffers, the ones who couldn't stand him, they're the reason the story survived at all. The mockery preserved the tenderness. There's a lesson in that somewhere about what lasts. But sit with what it meant, and with what it meant to Theron in particular. This was why they would not kill for the table. This was why the meals were plain and green and bloodless. Not a rule for the sake of rules, but the plain, staggering consequence of the belief. If any living thing might carry a human soul, if the ox in the yoke, the fish in the net, the bird in the snare, might each be housing someone who had once laughed at a table you sat at, then to take that life carelessly was not butchery. It was something closer to betrayal. Every creature was potentially kin. Every death potentially a reunion cut short. And Theron, who had come up that dusty road carrying a grief he could not even name. Theron stood very still when he understood it, because think of what this offered him. He had crossed the sea to get away from a loss. He had built his whole flight on the certainty that something was gone, final, sealed, ended. That is what grief tells you, in its flat and total voice. Gone means gone. And here was a quiet man behind a curtain, and a whole community living by his word, insisting on the opposite with their entire lives, insisting that nothing loved is ever actually annihilated, only changed, only moved to another room in the same enormous house. That the person he was mourning had not been erased from the universe, that the universe does not do erasing, but had simply set down one life, and somewhere, in some form, taken up another. I don't tell you that to argue that they were right. I tell you because Theron, lying awake that night doing his gentle accounting of the day, found that the splinter of light had gone all the way in. And for the first time since he'd stepped off that boat, the thing in his chest felt not lighter, exactly, but held, as if his sorrow had been quietly informed that it was not the last word. As if it had been told, wait, you may not understand yet how, but nothing you loved is truly lost. It has only changed its house. That was the first great gift the silence gave him, the consolation underneath everything. But he was still only at the edge of this world. He had been given the kindness at its heart, the deathless soul, the kinship of all that lives. What he had not yet been given were its riddles. And this brotherhood, it turned out, guarded rules far stranger than mercy to a dog. Rules that made no sense at all. Don't eat beans. Don't poke a fire with a knife. When you rise, smooth the bed behind you, and leave no print of your body in the world. Theron would spend the next season of his life collecting these commandments, like a man handed a book of riddles with all the answers torn out, and slowly, beginning to suspect that the not knowing was the whole point. But that is where we'll pick up the thread tomorrow night. The rules, when they finally came to him, did not sound like wisdom. They sounded like the mutterings of a very particular grandmother. Do not poke the fire with a knife. Do not eat beans. When you rise in the morning, roll up the bedclothes and smooth away the shape your body left, so that no print of you remains. Put the right shoe on first, but wash the left foot first. Do not step over a yoke or a balance beam. Do not break a loaf of bread. Do not pick up what has fallen from the table. Do not sacrifice a white rooster. Do not wear the image of a god on your ring. Theron collected them the way you might collect the coins of a country you've never heard of, turning each one over, finding it real, heavy, minted with obvious care. And having not the faintest idea what it would buy, they were called the akusmata, the things heard. Short, memorized commandments passed from mouth to mouth, never. And this was the maddening part, never explained. No brother would tell you why you mustn't poke a fire with a knife. You simply mustn't. And the wanting to know was apparently your problem to sit with. Now, I'll be honest with you, Nightling. I have read a great many strange things in the making of these stories, and I still find this list one of the most delightful documents in all of ancient history. Picture poor Theron. He has crossed the sea. He has surrendered his voice for 5 years. He has been told the soul is deathless, and the whole cosmos hums with hidden order. Grand, shattering ideas, the kind a man restructures his life around. And then someone leans in, very gravely, as if imparting the secret of the ages, and tells him, whatever you do, do not, under any circumstances, eat a bean. He must have wondered once or twice whether he'd joined a school of philosophy or simply a very committed household with a lot of opinions about laundry. But, and here is the turn, and it's the whole of the chapter. He stayed with the strangeness long enough to feel it change shape in his hands. Because slowly, without anyone confirming it for him, he began to suspect that each of these little absurdities had a second body inside it. A folded lesson, a meaning tucked under the meaning. Do not poke the fire with a knife. Think about it for a moment. What is a fire already blazing? An anger. And what is a blade? A sharp word. So the rule, read the other way, is this: do not jab at a man who is already burning with rage. Do not bring the knife of your cleverness to someone's fury. You will only drive the flames higher. Do not eat the heart, which sounds like butchery, until you hear it sideways. Do not devour yourself with grief. Do not let sorrow consume the very organ it feeds on. Do not step over the balance beam. Do not trample on justice. Do not take more than your fair weight. And that one about the bed. Rise and smooth away the print of your body, and leave the place as though no one had slept there. On its surface, a tidy habit. Underneath, leave no trace of your ego in the world. Move through your one life so lightly that you press no permanent dent into it. Take up no more room than you were given. Do you see what they'd done? They had hidden lessons about anger and grief and justice and humility inside instructions about firewood and bedsheets, so that a novice would carry the rule around for years, bumping into it daily, until one ordinary morning the meaning cracked open on its own. A truth you decode yourself, they seem to have understood, sinks deeper than a truth you're handed. And the deepest one of all, Theron slowly realized, was the secrecy itself. The point was not only the hidden lesson, the point was that it was hidden, that you had to become the kind of person who could sit inside not knowing without clawing at it, who could hold a closed door without kicking it. The secret was that the meaning was secret. That was the teaching wearing the disguise of the taboo. Some of them he cracked. Some of them, honestly, no one has ever cracked. Not the ancients, not the scholars, not me. And chief among those were the beans. Abstain from beans. It was the most famous of all their rules and the most impenetrable. The brothers would not touch them. And the reasons whispered down the centuries are a whole shelf of theories that never quite agree. That beans were the gates through which souls passed on their way back to the living. So that to eat one was to swallow a homecoming. That they were too much like the beginnings of a human life to be chewed and gone. That the breath they stirred in the body was too near to the breath of the soul itself. Nobody was sure. Nobody is sure now. I'll leave it there for tonight. Hold on to the beans, Nightling. Tuck them in the back of your mind. Because that small, ridiculous, unexplained rule, do not eat a bean, is going to come back much later in this story, wearing a face you will not expect. And it will not be funny then. For now, only this. If there is a figure from history, or a strange little moment like this one, that you find yourself wondering about as you drift off, some person or event that snags at you and won't let go, do me a kindness and drop it in a comment. Truly. Some of the best stories I've ever told began as nothing more than someone's passing question, left for me in the dark. I read them. Sometimes one of them becomes a night like this one. Now, the riddles had done something to Theron that no one had planned for. They had trained his ear. All those years of listening for a meaning hidden beneath the surface of ordinary things had made him, without his noticing, exquisitely ready, so that when a plain, ordinary sound at last turned out to mean something, he was, for the first time in his life, able to hear it. It began with a piece of wood and a single string. There was an instrument in that place. The simplest instrument you can imagine, humbler than a child's toy. A long board. One string stretched tight along it, from end to end. And beneath the string, a small movable bridge. A little wedge you could slide to any point along its length, so that it stopped the string here, or here, or here. That was all. One string and a bridge that could divide it. They called it the monochord, the one string. And on that plain board, Theron came to believe the master had caught the universe in the act of being beautiful. Watch it with me. Slowly. This is the center of everything. You pluck the open string, its whole length singing. and it gives you a note. A low, full, resting tone. Let it be the ground you stand on. Now you take the little bridge and you slide it to the exact middle of the string. Not near the middle, the exact middle, one half against the other half perfectly. And you pluck again, and the note leaps up. But listen to how it leaps. It does not become a different note, a stranger. It becomes the same note, the very same, and yet higher, brighter, lifted, as though the first note had stood up and stepped into the light. Any ear on earth hears it instantly. Those two tones belong together. They are the same voice at two heights. We call that step the octave, and children sing it without being taught. And the secret of it, the whole secret, is a number so simple it seems impossible that it could hold such beauty. Half the string against the full string, the one against the two, 2 to 1. That agreement your ear feels, that homecoming of a sound to itself. It is not a mystery of taste, not a matter of mood. It is a whole number, wearing music as a disguise. And it does not stop there. That was the thing that must have taken Theron's breath. Slide the bridge so that 2 parts of the string sound against 3, a ratio of 3 to 2, and you get another sweetness, another pair of tones that lean into each other and rest. The interval we call the 5th, the sound underneath 1,000 songs. 3 parts against 4, 4 to 3. And there is yet another concord, the 4th. Over and over, the intervals that the human ear finds beautiful turn out to be the intervals made by the simplest whole numbers, 2 to 1, 3 to 2, 4 to 3. The most consonant sounds in the world, the ones that soothe us and gather us and make the hair rise on the arm. Every one of them is a small, clean fraction, not an accident of the fraction itself singing. I want you to feel the size of what that meant to them, because it is easy to hear it as a curiosity and miss the earthquake. They had found a place where beauty and number were not 2 things but one thing. Where the thing you loved with your body, the sound that moved you before you could explain it, was underneath an act of arithmetic. Not cold arithmetic imposed on the world from outside. Warm arithmetic discovered inside the world, holding the loveliness up from beneath like a hidden architecture. It was as if they had lifted a corner of the visible and found arithmetic humming there, patiently in the dark, having been there all along. Here is the way I've come to hold it, and I offer it to you gently, as something to fall asleep turning over. It is as though the universe, at some point before there was anyone to hear, wanted to be beautiful, and went looking for a way to be beautiful that would be true, that would hold, that wouldn't crumble the moment you examined it. And what it found, the way it solved the problem of its own beauty, was number. Simple, whole number. The universe wanted to sing, and it found that the way to sing without lying was to sing in ratios. That is not a fact from a textbook. That is close to a form of worship, and it is very near to what these people actually felt, plucking that one poor string in the lamplight and hearing the cosmos answer back in fractions. Now, I have to tell you the beautiful story they told about how this was found, and I have to tell you in the same breath that it is not true. I'll flag it as I go, because the honesty is part of the gift. The story says the master was walking past a blacksmith's shop one day when he heard the hammers ringing on the anvil. Several smiths, several hammers striking together, and among the clanging, he suddenly heard harmony, concord in the chaos of the forge. And he rushed in, so the tale goes, and weighed the hammers, and found that the ones that rang together in sweet intervals had weights in those same simple ratios. The heavy against the light, 12-6, an octave in iron. It is a gorgeous story, and it is false, flatly, physically false. You cannot make it happen. The pitch a hammer strikes does not follow its weight in that neat way. Take those hammers, weigh them just so, strike them, and you will not get those clean intervals. It does not work. The ancients who first wrote it down were reaching for a picture, not reporting an experiment. But hold on to why they reached for that particular picture, because the false story is telling the truth about something. What it wants to show you is a mind so tuned, so awake, that it could walk down an ordinary street, past the most ordinary racket in the ancient world, the bang and clatter of a smith at work, and hear, inside the noise, the hidden order of the cosmos ringing through. The forge is a lie, but the listening is the truth. That is who these people believed their master was. A man who could overhear the deep structure of everything, in the last place you'd think to listen, in a clang, in a puppy's cry, in one plucked string. And once you have heard a single string confess that it was a number all along, you cannot stop. Because if a string is a number wearing a disguise, then what? Theron must have lain awake wondering, his trained ear wide open in the dark, what else is? And a far quieter question, one that would take the rest of his life to answer. If a short string sings high, and a long string sings low, then what, in the name of all the gods, is the note of a thing as vast and slow as a wandering star? He had thought when he arrived that numbers were servants, little tools you used to count sheep and measure grain and divide an inheritance. Dead things, useful and dead. That is not what they were here. Here numbers were alive. Here each number was a character, with a temperament, a station, even a kind of gender. A living presence you could come to know the way you know a person. And once Theron began to see them that way, he could not unsee it. And I suspect that after tonight, neither will you. Start with the simplest division of all, the one they saw everywhere, the odd numbers and the even. To them, the odd numbers were male, firm, limited, holding their shape. The even numbers were female, open, unlimited, endlessly divisible. Not better and worse, mind you. Two halves of how the world is made. The limiting and the limitless forever fitted together, and everything that exists born of their marriage. Then the numbers themselves, one by one, each with its own face. 1, the monad, they called it, was barely a number at all in their eyes. It was the source, the seed, the single point from which all the others come, the way a whole family comes from one ancestor. Add 1 to itself enough times, and you can build every number there is. So 1 was unity, origin the undivided. Before there is any many, there is the one. It stood for them very close to the divine. And 4 was justice. Now why on earth would a number be justice? Because 4 is the first square. 2 rows of 2, a little block of pebbles you can actually lay out on the ground, perfectly balanced, equal on every side, 4 corners answering 4 corners. It is the number that gives back exactly what it takes, that owes nothing and is owed nothing, squared away and even. Lay it in the sand and look at it. A fair thing, a settled thing. Justice you can hold in your palm. 5 was marriage, and this one is lovely, once you see the arithmetic of it. To them, the first female number was 2, and the first true male number was 3. And 2 plus 3 is 5. 5 is the union of the first woman and the first man, the 2 principles joined into something new. So 5 was wedding and love and the joining of unlike things into one. A whole idea of human life, folded into a single digit. And then there was 7, my favorite of their strange little pantheon. 7 they called the Virgin, the maiden number. Why? Because among the first 10 numbers, 7 is curiously alone. It is not born of any of the smaller numbers, multiplied together. No 2 of them make it, and it does not, in its turn, make any number within the 10. It neither has parents among them, nor bears children among them. It stands entirely by itself, generated by none and generating none. And so they thought of it as motherless, fatherless, pure, and likened it to the goddess who sprang not from a womb, but straight and whole from the head of Zeus. A number with no family. Isn't that a strange and beautiful thing to have noticed? I could go on. They had a reading for every one of them. But I want you to feel the world this makes, not just the list. Because if this is true, then a number is never just a quantity. 4 is not merely 4 apples. 4 is justice standing balanced in the corner of the room whenever 4 of anything gather. To walk through a world like theirs was to walk through a world where the ordinary was quietly charged, where counting was a kind of prayer, and every handful of pebbles held a personality. And they did mean pebbles. This is the part I love, the part that makes it real and not just mystical. They laid numbers out as actual patterns of little stones in the sand. 3 pebbles make a triangle. 4 make a square. Add the right border of stones around your square, an L-shaped bracket they call the gnomon, and you get the next perfect square, and the next growing outward in the dust like something alive. Numbers for them had shapes. You could see them. you could build justice out of gravel and study it in the afternoon light. And at the very heart of all of it, the holiest figure they possessed was one particular little triangle of stones. They called it the Tetractys. Picture it. One pebble at the top. Beneath it, 2. Beneath those, 3. And along the base, 4. A neat triangle 4 rows high. And if you count the stones, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, they come to 10. The first 4 numbers stacked into a perfect triangle summing to 10, which they held to be the perfect number, the number that gathers up all the others and completes the circle. In those 10 dots they saw, folded together, almost everything they believed, the point becoming the line the surface, the surface the solid, the whole birth of shape out of unity, and the very numbers of the musical ratios Theron had just heard in the plucked string. 1, 2, 3, 4. The same 4 numbers that made the octave, and the 5th and the 4th were the 4 rows of the sacred triangle. Of course they were. To these people, that was not coincidence. That was the universe rhyming with itself. They held it so sacred that the old stories say, when a novice swore his deepest oath, he swore it not by any god but by this. By the one who had handed down the Tetractys, they'd say, the fountain and the root of all nature, the wellspring of their whole wisdom. Something to that effect. The exact words come to us second-hand and worn smooth by retelling. But the shape of the vow is clear enough. They bound their souls to a triangle of 10 dots. And standing in the middle of all of it, breathing it in, Theron arrived at the creed, the sentence beneath every sentence, stated by these people with total, unshakable confidence. All things are number. Everything that is, the string, the pebble, the star, the soul itself, is, at bottom, number and ratio. To know the number of a thing is to know the thing. There is nothing that is not underneath arithmetic singing. He believed it completely. So did they, every one of them. But that is later, not tonight. Tonight, we climb the last step to the highest and most beautiful thing they believed, the summit of the whole vision, and I want us to go slowly and take a full breath, because this is the thought I most want to leave you holding as you fall asleep. The master had shown Theron the string. A short string sings a high note, a long string sings a low one, and the lovely agreements between them are simple whole numbers. Good. Now lift your eyes. Lift them off the board, off the pebbles in the sand, off the lamplit room entirely. Lift them up, past the roof, past the night air, out to the great slow lights that wheel across the sky. For here was the question the string had planted, and the answer is the most audacious idea in this whole audacious story. If a small thing moving makes a small high sound, and a large thing moving makes a large low one, then what of those? Those enormous bodies, the sun and the moon and the wandering stars, each riding its own vast circle through the heavens, each impossibly huge, each sweeping through impossibly great distances at its own steady speed. Anything that large, moving that fast, they reasoned, must make a sound. It cannot sweep through the sky in silence. And if their distances and their speed stand in the same simple ratios as the string, and why would they not, in a cosmos built of number, then each one is sounding its own steady tone. The near, swift bodies singing high and bright. The far, slow, ponderous ones holding the lowest notes of all, so deep they are more felt than heard. Do you understand what they are describing? The heavens as an instrument. The whole sky a single enormous lyre. Every string a world. The planets not merely moving but playing, each holding its one eternal note, and all of them together, forever, sounding one vast unbroken chord. The very word they used for the ordered universe, cosmos, meant, at root, a beautiful arrangement, a beautiful order, the same word you might use for a well-made piece of music or a woman's fine array. To them, the sky was not a machine. It was a song being sung so slowly and so hugely that a single note might last 1,000 years. The music of the spheres. The universe speaking, singing, without pause since the beginning of everything. And now the question that any child would ask, the question Theron surely asked, the question that is rising in you right now, half drowsy in the dark. Then why can't we hear it? If the sky has been singing this whole time, this immense and constant chord, why has not one of us, in all our lives, heard a single note of it? And their answer, their answer. It is the most beautiful thing in this entire story, and I have saved it for the top of the climb. We cannot hear it, because it has never stopped. And think of a man who was born inside a mill, beside the great turning wheel and the rush of the water, and who has lived his whole life there, and has never once in all his years known the wheel to be still. Ask him about the roar of it, and he will look at you, puzzled. What roar? He hears nothing. Not because the mill is quiet, it is deafening, but because he has never had a moment of silence to hear it against. The sound has no edge for him. It has soaked so completely into the whole of his experience that it has become, to him, the same as nothing. That, they said, is you. That is all of us. The music of the heavens has been sounding this exact chord, these very tones, since the first instant of your life. Before you had a name. Before you had a thought. Before you drew your first breath, the sky was already singing, and it has not paused once, not for a heartbeat, in all the years since. And so, you cannot hear it. You have never known a silence deep enough to hear it against. The song is not absent. You are simply too thoroughly inside it. The music you keep straining to catch on the far edge of every quiet evening is not far away at all. It is the sea you are swimming in. You have never not heard it. Let that turn slowly. Because I think, and here I am no longer only telling you about Theron, I think That is the truest thing these forgotten people left us, truer than any triangle. So many of us go through our days feeling quietly deaf, numb, half here, certain that some music has gone out of the world, that we've lost the knack of wonder, that other people once heard something we can no longer catch. And their answer, across 2,500 years, is so gentle it aches. You have not lost the music. Nothing has gone out of the world. You are simply steeped in it too deeply to notice, and your numbness is not the absence of the song, but the sound of it, everywhere, all the time, with no edge left to mark it by. And Theron, who had come up that dusty road with a grief he could not name, who had crossed the sea to escape a loss he was certain was final. Theron stood beneath that singing sky and felt the last things shift into place. Because he had learned, in the silence, that the soul does not die, but only changes its house. And he had learned, at the string, that beauty is number, and number does not perish. And now he learned that the whole cosmos is one unbroken chord that has never once fallen still. And somewhere in the meeting of those three things, the sorrow he had carried in through the gate did not vanish. It was not erased. He was not asked to pretend it away, but it changed. It found its place in the music. The one he had lost was not gone out of the universe. He understood. The universe does not do that, does not let a note simply cease. His grief had only been a place where the song had grown too quiet for him to follow, for a while. And the person he mourned was still, somehow, in the chord. Only changed. Only moved to a tone he had not yet learned to hear. He wept, I think, standing there. Not the tearing kind. The other kind, the kind that arrives when something you had given up as lost turns out to have been beside you the whole time. The vision was complete now. The string, the numbers, the singing sky, the deathless soul, it all fit, it all rhymed, it was all one seamless and luminous thing. Nothing, surely, could crack a world this whole. And for a while, in the fullness of those years, with the brotherhood at its height, the women among the learners, the common table, the hymns at dawn, nothing did. Before the fire, before the grudge, before the man who was told no, there was a long season when this strange community by the sea simply lived inside its beautiful order, more fully than perhaps any people has lived before or since. Let me take you into that fullness next, into the warmth of it, before we have to speak of how it ended. By now, Theron had been inside those walls for years, and the strangeness had become his home. That is a quiet thing to say, but sit with it, because it's the whole texture of this chapter. There comes a point in any hard, chosen life when it stops feeling like a discipline you are enduring and starts feeling like the shape of who you are. The silence that had once been a weight was now a kind of clean, open room he lived in. The plain bread tasted like enough. And the people around him, the ones who had watched him at the gate, the ones who had never once told him he was doing well, had become, without any announcement, his family. He belonged. After all that grief, and all that crossing of water, the ache of it, he had finally landed somewhere that held him. He was, in the language of the Order, a learner now, no longer only a listener. You'll remember that in his first years, he had been one of the akausmatikoi, the hearers, the ones who received the teachings as bare commandments, on faith, without the reasons why. That was the outer ring. But there was an inner one, the mathematikoi, the learners, the ones who, after long proving, were finally given the reasons beneath the rules, the workings behind the doctrines, and the right to ask their own questions and follow their own thought. Theron had crossed that line. He no longer merely obeyed the Order, he understood it from the inside and was trusted to help carry it. To be handed the why of a thing, after years of being handed only the what. There are not many deeper ways for people to say to a person, "We trust you now." And the life that held him was, I think, one of the most remarkable ways of living the ancient world ever produced. Start with the money, because nothing tells you what people truly believe faster than what they do with their possessions. The Brotherhood lived by a saying they themselves are said to have coined, one you may have heard without knowing where it came from. The things of friends are held in common, not shared, reluctantly. Held in common, pooled, surrendered, made no longer yours and no longer mine, but ours. When you entered fully, you laid your property into a common fund, administered by trustees, and you drew from it as you needed. The idea beneath it was radiant and simple. If these people are truly my friends, truly my kin in soul, then to clutch my belongings against them is a kind of lie. Real friendship holds nothing back. Now, I'd be painting you a saint's portrait if I didn't admit that living this way had its comedy. Theron, for all his years of silence and study, was still a Greek, and a Greek has opinions about his belongings. There is a moment I like to imagine. The first cold morning, he reached for his good cloak, the warm one, the one he'd had since home, and found that some brother had already helped himself to it under the noble principle that the things of friends are held in common. Held in common, indeed. I suspect a very old, very unphilosophical feeling rose in Theron's chest in that instant, and that he had to stand there and breathe through it, and remind himself, through gritted teeth, that his ego was one of the things he was supposed to be leaving no trace of. The soul is deathless. The cloak, apparently, is everyone's. Sainthood is easier in theory. But the warmth of that life was real, and it ran deeper than cloaks. They ate together, in the evenings, in small groups, a table of 10 or so, sharing bread and vegetables and a little watered wine, with readings and libations. The meal itself, a kind of gentle rite. They rose to hymns, they greeted the sun with singing, and the lyre moved through their days like a physician making rounds, tuning a soul here that had gone sharp with anger, soothing one there that grief had pulled flat. They asked of husbands the same faithfulness they asked of wives, which in that age was nearly unheard of. And an old comic playwright, poking fun at their austerity, left us the sourest little sketch of them. Scanty food, he sneered, cold, dirt, silence, gloom, and no baths, which tells you, if nothing else, that they were odd enough to be worth mocking, and content enough not to care. And then there is the thing about this brotherhood that still, after all these centuries, makes me stop. They admitted women fully, as members, as students, as thinkers, in their own right, in an age, remember, that mostly kept its women indoors, and silent, decorative, and unlettered. Here, women sat among the learners. The old catalogues remember something like 17 of them by name, which is 17 more than almost any other movement of the age bothered to record. And at the center of them stands Theano. Who was she? Here the sources do that thing they so often do with this whole story. They disagree, and they disagree in an interesting way. Some call Theano the wife of Pythagoras. Others call her his pupil. A few seem to want her to be both, and a few can't decide. I won't pretend to resolve for you what the ancients themselves could not. But this much comes through every version. She was a philosopher in her own right, remembered for her own thought on harmony and virtue, and the middle way. Not a wife standing behind a great man, but a mind standing beside other minds. And the tradition holds that when the master was gone, it was Theano, with her daughters, who helped keep the teaching alive. One of those daughters, Demo, was entrusted with his most secret writings, and though she is said to have lived in real poverty, she would not sell them, because he had asked her not to give them to the world. Imagine guarding a treasure you're forbidden to spend. That was the kind of loyalty this strange family grew. Here, before we go on, and before the shadow comes, let me pause for just a moment for those of you who find, on nights like this, that you want to go deeper into these old sources yourself. On my Patreon, I read the classics in full, at length, in this same voice, for the same kind of quiet listening. Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, among others, whole and unhurried. And subscribers can ask, if there's a classic you've always meant to read but never quite sat down with, request it, and, as I like to say, I will do. That's all. Now, back into the dark. Because this was the brotherhood at its very height. Rich, humane, faithful, singing at dawn, holding all things in common, seating women among its sages, governing its city with a quiet and disciplined hand. A world so whole it seemed it could never break. And it did not break from the outside. Not yet. The first crack came from within, from one of their own, a brother who went looking, in perfect faith, for the number at the bottom of a very simple shape, and found something down there that should not, by everything they believed, have existed at all. Draw a square. Any square, a tile, a paving stone, a shape scratched in the sand. Give each of its sides a length of exactly 1 unit, whatever unit you like. Now draw the line from one corner, across the middle, to the far corner. The diagonal. A single straight line, plain as anything. A child could draw it. You can lay your finger along it right now, in your mind. How long is that line? That is all he asked. His name, the tradition says, was Hippasus, and he was one of them, a brother, a believer, a man who held the creed as dearly as any of them, that all things are number, that every length and every quantity in the whole of creation can be spoken as a ratio of whole numbers, a clean relation of this many to that many. That was not a theory to them. It was the floor they stood on. So Hippasus, standing on that floor, asked the most natural question in their whole world. This diagonal, what is its number? What ratio of whole numbers names it? And the answer, when it came, was none. Not, we haven't found it yet. Not, the fraction is very large and very fussy. None. There is no ratio of whole numbers, not the simple ones, not the enormous ones, not any of them. Not if you searched every fraction that could ever be written until the end of time, that will ever exactly name the length of that diagonal. It is a real length. You have drawn it. You can hold a string against it. And yet the thing they had built their entire cosmos upon, number, ratio, the clean relation of whole to whole, cannot capture it. The line is there. The number for it is not. The diagonal slips clean through the net of counting and is gone. Sit for a moment with what that meant to people who believed, with their whole souls, that all is number. They had found a length inside the very simplest shape there is, a square, 4 equal sides. Nothing could be humbler, and that length could not be spoken in the language they thought the universe was written in. It was as if a man who believed the world was made entirely of words had opened his own front door and found, standing on the step, something that could not be named in any word that existed or ever would. A real thing. A nameless thing. Right there in the geometry of a floor tile. Now, I want to be careful how I hand this to you, because there is a cheap version of this moment and a true one. The cheap version says, and so their whole beautiful faith was a lie, and the dream collapsed, and the joke was on them all along. That is not what I believe, and I don't think it's the truest reading of what happened. Because here is the other way to stand in front of that nameless line. Not as a refutation, as a widening. They had thought the cosmos was exactly as large as number, that if they learned all the ratios, they would have learned the whole of reality, wall to wall. And what this quiet, devastating little line told them was that the cosmos is larger than that. Larger and stranger and deeper than even their master's vision had reached. There was more here than could be counted. The order they loved was real, but it opened, at its very center, onto a mystery it could not close. And that, I think, is the harder and more grown-up kind of faith. When the truth you have built your life upon develops a crack, and if you live long enough, one always does, you are given a choice. You can deny the crack. You can hate the one who showed it to you. You can try to drown the whole troubling thing and go on pretending your certainty was total. Or you can do the braver thing, the thing that actually lets a soul keep growing. You can let your understanding become larger than your certainty. You can love the order and bow to the mystery at the same time. You can say, the world is even more than I thought, and I am even smaller, and strangest of all, that is a kind of good news. The Brotherhood, to their lasting credit, did the real work here. They did not bury it. They went on, in time, to actually prove this troubling truth, to show, with rigor, that such uncapturable lengths genuinely exist, woven right into the bones of geometry. That is real. That happened. The world does hold quantities that no ratio will ever tame, and it was these strange, singing mystics who first stared that fact in the face. There is a darker story attached to poor Hippasus, a whispered one, that he was drowned at sea for letting the secret out, the gods themselves swallowing the man who spoke the unspeakable. I'll say it only once, and softly, and tell you plainly that historians take it for a later legend, a dramatic shadow the centuries painted over a quieter truth. What the man actually earned was not the bottom of the sea. It was a place at the edge of a mystery, looking down. And Theron, watching a brother find the limit of the very creed that had remade him, did not lose his faith that night. Something better happened. His faith stopped being a wall and became a window. He held the beautiful order a little more loosely now, and loved it a little more deeply for holding it so. He had learned, at last, to carry a truth without clenching it. And it was precisely that earned, unclenched steadiness, that soul that could hold both the order and the mystery without breaking, that the Brotherhood had been waiting all these years to see in him. He was ready now. Ready, after all this time, to be given the one thing the silence had always withheld. A face. The day came without ceremony, which somehow made it larger. 5 years of silence, and the years of watching before that, and all the seasons of string and number and singing sky, and then, one ordinary morning, Theron was simply told that he might go through, past the curtain, past the veil that had hung between him and the voice since his very first day, the veil he had knelt before and listened to and wondered at, and, some nights, quietly resented. The thing, he had crossed a sea and surrendered his voice and reordered his entire life to earn. Today, he could see the Master's face. I want to slow us down here, the way the moment deserves. Because this is the payoff of everything, the long wait cashing in, and it does not arrive as a thunderclap. It arrives as a wave, soft and enormous and quiet. He went through. And behind the veil, behind all of it, the golden thigh and the river that spoke his name, and the 2 cities at 1 hour, and the whole shimmering weight of legend. Behind the veil sat an old man. Just that, an old man. Plainer than the stories, by far. Lined and weathered, and mortal, with the ordinary hands of an ordinary elder folded in his lap. No light poured off him. No God looked out through his eyes. He was, in the plainest and most undeniable sense, only a man, a very old, very tired, very human man who had lived a long time and thought a great deal and was now, like all men, running slowly down toward his end. And Theron, standing there at last, where he had ached for years to stand, felt something he had not expected. Not disappointment, exactly. Something gentler and stranger and much harder to name. Because as he looked at that plain old face, he understood, all at once, the way you understand the true meaning of a thing only when you finally stand in front of it, that he had been given the wrong idea of what he was waiting for. He had thought, at the gate, that behind the veil were answers. The secret. The final thing that once you saw it, you would know. But that is not what was back there. What was back there was a way of listening. The old man had never had a secret to hand him. He had only, patiently, over years, taught him how to hear the string, the numbers, the sky, the cry of the dog, the meaning folded under the surface of ordinary things. The face was not the answer. The face was the last lesson, that the deepest things do not come wrapped as gods. They come as a plain old man and a plucked string and a life lived a certain quiet way. And there was one more gift in passing the veil, one I have saved because Theron himself had half stopped believing it would ever come. He was allowed to speak. 5 years. 5 years of holding his tongue, of swallowing every question and every wonder and every hot, young objection, of being a man made entirely of listening, and now, standing before the old man, the long silence was simply lifted. He could answer. He could ask. His own voice, unused so long it must have felt like a stranger's, borrowed from his own throat, was handed back to him. And here is what those 5 years had quietly done. He found that he had almost nothing he needed to say. The young man who had climbed the dusty road had been so full of questions, full of grievance, full of himself, full of the ceaseless inner noise of a mind that had never once been made to be still. The man who stood here now had learned, in all that silence, that most of what he'd once been so desperate to say had not been worth the breaking of a single quiet moment. So when at last he was free to speak, he spoke little. And what he did say, he meant all the way to the bottom. That was what the silence had been carving in him the whole time. So slowly he never felt the knife. Not muteness. Wait. And here, standing in that plain human presence, the last of Theron's long grief came up in him one final time. The loss he had carried up the dusty road all those years ago. The one he'd crossed the water to escape. Only now, it did not feel like a wound he was hiding from his teacher. Looking at that mortal, aging face, a face that would itself, before long, be gone, Theron understood that his teacher was not exempt from any of it. This luminous old man would die too. The greatest soul Theron had ever known was as mortal as the friend he'd lost. And somehow, that did not deepen the grief. It dissolved something in it. Because if even this, even him, was only passing through, changing houses like everyone and everything else, then death was not the outer darkness Theron had fled from. It was just another turn in the music. His loss was not erased, standing there. But it was, finally and fully, changed, folded into the same great chord that held the master, and the string, and the stars, and would one day hold Theron himself. Still there, still sounding, only moved to a note he was no longer afraid of. I've wondered, telling you this, what I would have felt in his place. To give 5 years of my life, my voice, my property, my whole former self, to earn a single look at a face I'd built into a god in the dark, and to pull back the curtain and find only a man, an old man with tired hands. I honestly don't know whether I would have felt cheated, or whether I would have felt I'd been handed the most important truth of my life. I'm still not sure which of those it is. Maybe the not being sure is the whole point. Maybe the disappointment and the revelation are, in the end, the exact same thing, seen from 2 sides, and wisdom is just learning to hold them both. Theron had arrived. After everything, he stood at the center of the circle, past the last veil, a full brother at last, home in the deepest sense a person can be home. Which is, of course, precisely the moment the world beyond the walls chose to reach for its torches. The whole catastrophe, the fire, the scattering, the ending of everything Theron had found, began, as so many catastrophes do, not with an army or a plague, but with one proud man being told, to his face, that he was not good enough. His name was Cylon, and here I want to be careful, because it would be easy and lazy to make him the villain of the piece, the black-hatted enemy who burns the good people's house. That's not how I want to tell it, and I don't think it's how it truly was. Cylon was, by every account, one of the leading men of Croton. Wealthy, high-born, powerful in the ordinary ways. A city measures power, land, name, followers, the weight to make things happen. He was used to doors opening. That is the thing to understand about him before anything else. He had lived a whole life in which the doors of Croton opened at his approach, because of who his family was and what his purse could do. And then he came to the one door in the city that measured a man differently. He applied to join the Brotherhood. And the Brotherhood, who did not care in the least about his land or his name or his followers, who looked instead at his character, at the temper in him, at what kind of soul was actually there under the wealth. The Brotherhood looked at Cylon and said, "No." Think about what that did to a man like that. It was not the refusal itself, I suspect, that broke something in him. Rich and powerful men are refused things sometimes. It was how he had been refused. He had been seen. Somewhere behind that veil, a plain old man and his circle of quiet initiates had looked past everything Cylon had spent his life building. The money, the status, the careful public face, and judged the private truth of him and found it wanting. There is no wound quite like being seen clearly by someone you cannot buy, cannot threaten, and cannot fool. It gets in under all the armor, and it does not heal clean. So Cylon did what wounded proud men have always done. He turned the private hurt into a public cause. He could not say, even to himself, "They looked into me and did not like what they saw. That is unbearable. No one can carry that." So he said, instead, "Who are these people? To rule us and judge us?" Why should this secret order, with its silences and its curtains and its rules, sit above the rest of us and govern our city? And the terrible thing, the thing that made it catch like dry grass, was that it wasn't entirely wrong. Because the Brotherhood had become powerful, genuinely, politically powerful. This is true, and it matters. They were not a gentle little club of stargazers off in the hills. Over the years, they had become something like the ruling council of Croton. Their initiates held office, guided the city's affairs, shaped how the young were taught. Their influence had spread to other cities up and down that Italian coast. And to an ordinary citizen who had never been behind the veil, who only saw the closed order that kept its reasons secret and somehow ran everything, well, resentment needs very little soil to grow. Cylon didn't have to invent the city's unease. He only had to give it a voice and a direction and a name to hate. His own name for his own wound, dressed up as everyone's grievance. He gathered the disaffected, the passed over, the resentful, the ones who had chafed under the quiet rule of the silent few. And slowly, in the taverns and the meeting places of Croton, a movement took shape, a movement whose true origin was one man's humiliation, but whose banner read like justice. Theron, inside the walls, would have heard only the edges of it at first. A coolness in the market. A muttering that stopped when a brother came near. The sense, hard to pin down, that the city they had served for a generation had begun, somewhere, to turn. And then one evening, an evening like any other, with nothing to mark it as the hinge of everything, the brothers and sisters gathered, as they so often did, at the great house of Milo, the wrestler. The strong man's house. The safe one. They came together to share the common meal, and to sing, and to be, as they had been for so many years, simply and wholly among their own. They did not know it was the last time. And so we come back, at last, to the fire. We began here, you and I, a long while ago now, at the very start of this night, before you knew a single one of their names. The house of Milo. The torches in the street that were not a festival. I told you then that to understand it, we would have to go back, and we did. We went all the way back to a grieving young man walking up a dusty road toward a gate. And now we have returned to the same night, the same house, the same slow gathering light in the street. Only you are not the same listener who stood here at the beginning. You know them now, and that changes everything the fire means. Let me tell it softly. It does not need to be loud. The loud version would betray it. You remember what they believed, that the whole cosmos is a single chord, sounding without pause since before any of us had a name, a music so constant we mistake it for silence. Hold that in your mind now, because what happens on this night is that a handful of the voices singing that chord are, very suddenly, taken out of the song. The same melody that carried us up the mountain in wonder comes back to us here at the bottom. The same melody, note for note. Only lower now, and sadder, and never, ever louder. the Cylonians came in the evening. They surrounded the house where the brothers and sisters had gathered, the strong man's house, the safe one, and they blocked the doors, and they brought fire to the walls. The first smoke, I told you at the beginning, is almost gentle. A grey ribbon threading up under the eaves, and then the patience of it ends. I will not take you inside those walls. I did not at the beginning, and I will not now. Some things a story should walk up to, and then step back from, and this is the deepest of them. What happened inside that house, I will leave where the centuries have left it, in a merciful dark. It is enough to know that a way of living that had taken a generation to build, a whole quiet civilization of the soul, was undone in a single evening by the resentment of one proud man who had been told no. Only two came out. The two youngest and the strongest. The oldest tradition gives us even their names, which is a small mercy, because a name is a candle, Archippus and Lysis. Two young men, stumbling out into the dark street, alive, coughing, carrying nothing, no scroll, no treasure, nothing your hands could hold. Only what was inside them. Only the music and the numbers and the memory of a face behind a veil. And it would fall to them and to the few others scattered like sparks that night to carry all of it out of the burning and keep it lit by whisper for a very long time. There is one more image the old tellers could not let go of, and I will give it to you the way they gave it, not as fact, but as the thing they needed to believe. They said, though some told it of this night and some of another, for the tellers moved this image to whichever fire broke their hearts best, that, as the flames spread, some of the brothers threw themselves down into them and made of their own bodies a bridge, so that the master might walk across and out and live. I won't linger there. I'll only say what it means that they told it, that these were people who believed, all the way down, that no soul is ever truly lost. And so, if the story is even half true, they went into that fire, not as men throwing their lives away, but as men who thought they were simply changing houses a little early to buy their teacher one more dawn. Whether it happened, no one can say. That they told it tells you everything about how they loved him. Now, I owe you one piece of honesty about this fire, because I have been telling it to you as a single night, and the truth is gentler and stranger than a single night. The old sources blur together what were most likely two waves of violence against these people. One earlier, around the turn of the 6th century into the 5th, close to the master's own lifetime, and a later, more thorough one, a full generation after he was gone. The famous burning of Milo's house, with Archippus and Lysis walking out of it, that one most likely belongs to the later wave, years after the master himself had died elsewhere. The tradition pressed the two together, the way memory does with grief, folding decades into one unbearable evening, because that is how loss feels, as though it all happened at once, in the dark, in a single fire. I won't pretend to untangle for you what the centuries tangled. I only want you to know that the flames came more than once, across years, and that a whole world of the spirit did not fall in a night, but guttered out slowly, like a lamp running dry. Which is, if anything, the sadder way to go. A philosophy of harmony undone by a single sour note of a grudge. That is the shape of it. Let the fire settle now. Let it burn down to a low glow and let the street go quiet. Before we follow the ashes, one small, gentle thing. The people who make these episodes with me, the animators, the editors, they pour real and quiet care into bringing nights like this one to life, into giving these old shadows a face you can actually see. If you only ever listen, and I know most of you drift off to just the sound of my voice, which is exactly as it should be, then some evening when you're awake, treat yourself, just once, to the video episode, and see what they've made of all this. That's all. Now let's step back into the hush and follow the smoke. The master himself was not in that house on that night. He had died before it, years before, somewhere else, and here, near the end, even his death slips through our fingers. That is the strange and fitting thing. A man who lived his whole life behind a veil does not, it turns out, step out from behind it to die. He keeps the veil to the last. The ancients told not one story of how Pythagoras died, but many. One old writer counted as many as 10, and I want to lay the 3 that matter side by side for you, and then, unusually, I want to refuse to choose between them. Because the not knowing is not a gap in this story. By now, it is the story. Here is the first, and the quietest, and the one the soberest historians reach for when they want to be careful. The violence had already begun to lap at the Brotherhood in Croton, and the old man fled. He went with a small band of his followers, looking for a city that would take them in. They came to Locris, and the Locrians met them at the border and turned them gently away. Go elsewhere, old man. We want no part of your trouble. So they went on, and came at last to Metapontum, another Greek town along that same coast. And there, in the temple of the Muses, the goddesses of memory and of music and of song, the old man took shelter. And there, the sober story says, he simply stopped eating, stopped moving toward anything. And he died quietly, among the statues of the very goddesses whose gifts had been his whole life, memory and music and song. An old man out of cities to flee to, laying his deathless soul theory to its first personal test, in the house of the powers he had served. There are worse places to die than among the Muses. Here is the second story. And you have been waiting for it, though you don't yet know that you have. Do you remember, a long way back in this night, the strangest of all their little rules, the one I told you to tuck into the back of your mind? Do not eat beans. The rule no one could ever quite explain. The one I promised would come back, much later, wearing a face you would not expect. And I told you it would not be funny then. It is not funny now. The story goes that the old man was running, pursued, this time, by men who meant to kill him. He ran until the ground ahead of him opened into a field. A field of beans. Fava beans, growing thick, the whole width of his escape. And to cross it, to save his own life, he would have had to run through them, trample them, break the sacred law he had kept and taught and built a brotherhood upon for the whole of his life. And he stopped. At the edge of the bean field, with his killers closing behind him, the old man stopped running. He would not cross. He would not, even to live, even with death at his back, break his own law. And so they caught him there, at the field's edge, and there his life ended, among the beans he would not trample. Now, I have carried this image with me for a long time, and I still cannot decide what it is. Is it the most sublime thing you have ever heard? A man so whole, so at one with his own belief, that he would not betray it by so much as a single step, not even to save his own life. A faithfulness so total, it makes our own compromises look like sand. Or is it the other thing? A man destroyed by rigidity, killed by a rule that no longer even made sense, a fanatic dying for a bean when a wiser man would have run. I genuinely do not know. I have turned it over 1,000 times, and I have come to think that the reason I cannot decide is that both are true at once, that the very same faithfulness, which is magnificent from one angle, is madness from another, and that this is the oldest and hardest riddle about conviction itself. When does devotion become its own kind of trap? Where is the line between integrity and fanaticism? The bean field does not answer. It only asks. Fittingly, the man made of riddles, riddling us still with his last breath. And here is the third story, softest of all, and it belongs to that other burning. An earlier one the tradition keeps tangling with Milo's, where the master himself was among the trapped, that after his students made their bridge of bodies in the flames, and he walked out alive across them, the grief of it broke him. What is left to live for when they have died for me? And he stopped eating and followed them out of the world by his own quiet choice. 3 deaths. The temple, the bean field, the broken heart. Which one is true? I cannot tell you. No one can. Not one of them can be proven, and every one of them is ancient, and each one is beautiful, and each one is a little unbearable. I'll give you only one fact to close his life, and it is true, and it is kind. Metapontum, the town that took the fugitive in, kept his memory. They made his house into a shrine and honored the old refugee for centuries, long after his own adopted Croton had turned on him and burned his brothers alive. The city that opened its door to a stranger with killers behind him is the city that remembered him best. There is a lesson folded in there, too, if you want it. But it is late, and I will let you find that one yourself. Here is the thing about a fire, though. The thing the men with the torches never understand. You can burn a house. You can burn every house. But if what you are trying to destroy has already gotten inside people, into the way they see, the way they listen, the way they carry themselves through an ordinary day, then all your fire really does is scatter it. The sparks go up. The wind takes them. And each one lands somewhere far away, in dry grass you didn't know was there, and starts a small new fire of its own, in a place you will never reach. That is what happened. The order died as a power. And that, precisely that, is how the idea got loose and lived. Follow the embers with me, just for a moment, before we sleep. Lysis, one of the two young men who walked out of Milo's burning house, fled across the sea and wandered, and finally came to rest in the city of Thebes, far to the north. And there this refugee, this survivor of a massacre, became a teacher. One of his students was a young man named Epaminondas, who would grow into one of the finest generals Greece ever produced, and who loved the old Pythagoreans so dearly. This homeless man who had walked out of a fire, carrying nothing but a way of listening, that he called him simply Father. A burned school and a boy calling its last ember Father. The music had found a new string. Another of them, Philolaus, did the thing the Brotherhood had forbidden for so long. He wrote it down. The first Pythagorean ever to put the vision in a book and send it out into the wider world. And that book traveled, hand to hand, city to city, until it reached a young Athenian named Plato, who read it and took the fire of it into his own enormous mind, and built into the foundations of all Western philosophy the Pythagorean dream, that the soul is deathless, that it is reborn, that the deepest structure of reality is number and proportion and harmony. And Archytas, down in Tarentum, statesman, general, mathematician, the last great man of the old tradition, is even said to have once reached out and saved Plato's very life. The embers, warming the future, in rooms the men with the torches could not have imagined. And then, let the centuries blur now. Let them run together like lamplight seen through a tired eye. Jump forward. 2,000 years. 2,000 years after an old man stopped at the edge of a bean field. There is a man in a cold northern country, half blind, poor, grieving children he has buried, bent over his charts by candlelight. His name is Kepler. And Kepler still believes, in the year 1619, in the dawn of modern science, he still believes, with his whole aching heart, that the planets are singing, that the heavens make a music. He is trying, in a book he calls The Harmony of the World, to find the actual chord to work out, from the real speeds of the real planets, in their real orbits. The notes of the song Pythagoras swore was always sounding. And here is the wonder of it, the thing that ought to lay the hair flat on your arm as you drift. While he was listening for that impossible music, he found something real. Chasing the song of the spheres, Johannes Kepler stumbled onto one of the true laws that govern the motion of the heavens, a law we still teach, still use, still trust. The mystic's dream, 2,000 years later, delivered a fact. The old man's song turned out to have a little bit of the sky's real grammar hidden inside it, after all. And it did not stop with Kepler. That same faith, that the world is written, underneath, in the language of number, that if you listen closely enough to anything at all, it will confess a hidden order, ran on through the very men who built the modern world. Galileo said it, almost as a creed, that the great book of the universe is written in the language of mathematics. Newton chased it his whole life. And every physicist alive tonight bent over their equations, trusting without quite being able to prove it, that the deepest truths of reality will turn out to be not ugly, but elegant. Not noise, but harmony. Every one of them is, though almost none would ever put it this way, still a little bit Pythagorean. Still listening across 2,500 years for the same chord. So the music was never quite silenced. It only changed its instruments. From a plucked string in a lamplit room, to a book smuggled out of a massacre, to Plato, to a half-blind man listening to the planets in the dark, to an equation on a modern blackboard, all the way down, faint but unbroken, to you tonight, lying here at the far end of the line, still somehow able to hear a little of it. And yet, here is the turn. Here is the whole of why I wanted to tell you this tonight. Say his name, Pythagoras, and what rises in your mind? A triangle, a right angle, a little formula about the squares on the sides, copied into a notebook on an ordinary afternoon, and never thought of again. That is what we kept. Out of all of it, the deathless wandering soul, the dead friend heard in a dog's cry, the numbers with their souls and their genders, the sacred triangle of 10 dots, the whole singing sky, the 5 years of silence, the man behind the veil. Out of all of that, we kept the one small piece that fit on a chalkboard. And we forgot the rest. We forgot the prophet and remembered only the shape. And the last, quiet joke of it, the thing that ought to make you smile, even as it aches, is that the triangle may not have even been his. The truth carved into that theorem was known 1,000 years before he was born, pressed into clay tablets in Babylon by people whose names are dust. The earliest Greeks who wrote of him never once connected him to it. The one thing we remember him for was likely never his to begin with. We reduced a luminous, strange, singing mystic down to a single formula, and then handed him a formula he probably didn't discover. We kept the triangle, and we lost the prophet. Tonight, we went looking for the rest. And what, in the end, became of Theron? He grew old. Of course he did. That is what happens to all of us who are lucky enough to keep changing houses slowly rather than all at once. Somewhere, in Thebes, perhaps, or Tarentum, or some small town along that coast where a few of the Embers had come to rest, an old man sat in the evening light, one of the last who could remember it firsthand. The gate, the dusty road, the 5 years of silence and how they had carved him into weight, the plucked string and the note that leapt up the same and yet higher. The face, at last, behind the veil, that plain, mortal, luminous old face. And I think, if you had sat beside him in that light, you could have asked him the question he had carried up the road as a grieving young man, all those years before. The question he'd asked at the very beginning, the one that started everything. What could possibly be worth surrendering your whole life to learn? And I think the old man would have been quiet for a long while. And then, I think he would have told you it was not a theorem. It was not a secret. It was not any single thing you could carry in your hand or write in a book. It was a way of listening, a way of moving through an ordinary world so that the ordinary world stopped being ordinary, so that a plucked string became a confession, and a dog's cry became a friend, and the plainest night sky became a music you had somehow always known. And it was one thing more. It was learning, at the very center of himself, that the losses he had crossed a sea to escape had never really been losses at all. That the one he had grieved was not gone out of the world, only changed, moved to a note he had finally, after a whole life, learned how to hear. Nothing he had loved was annihilated. It had only changed its house. That was what he had given his life to learn. And he would have told you, I think, that it was worth it. Every silent year of it. So let me leave you with the gifts they gathered, the ones that are yours now too, if you want them. That the soul does not die, but only changes its house. That every living thing is kin and carries, perhaps, someone you have loved. And that the music, the real one, the deep one, has been sounding since before you had a name, and is sounding still, this very moment, under the noise of everything, waiting only for a silence deep enough to hear it against. And one last thing. Their oldest habit, the one they did every night before sleep, I want to hand it to you now, and then I want you to let me go, and let yourself go, down into the dark. Before you sleep tonight, go back over your day, gently. Not to punish yourself, never that. Just walk back through it, from waking to now, the way they did. And ask yourself, softly, not what did I do wrong, but what did I leave undone? What small kindness, what word, what reaching out did I mean to do and not quite do? Notice it. Hold it for a moment, without cruelty. And then, this is the part they knew, the part we forget. Then, let it go. You have looked at it honestly. That is enough. Now, you may sleep. I don't know, in the end, whether they truly heard something we've simply forgotten how to hear. Whether the sky really sings, and we've only gone deaf to it. Or whether the forgetting is just the price of being alive and awake in a loud, bright, hurrying world. I don't have the answer. I've told you the whole story, and I still don't have it. But I've come to think the question itself is a good one to carry down into sleep, softer than any answer, and warmer, and somehow enough. Rest now. Since you made it this far, I'm glad you enjoyed the episode. If you would like to continue listening to episodes with similar themes, I linked them in the description below. You will also find a playlist of our most popular videos. Sleep now, Nightlings. And wake up, as always, a little stronger and a little wiser. The story is done. but yours continues.